Good hello. I am Pisces Palmist, the online palmistry reader, and this week we are looking at the hands of Sir David Attenborough, the UK nature conservationist and presenter. He is knighted and he is 98 years old now. I have a really clear image of his left arm here. And this reading really is with a view to look back on his life and what his hands tell us about his career, his personality, and anything else we might see in his hands as well. What sort of a person he is. Now, I've managed to get his left hand really clearly, but his right hand was quite difficult. So I'm going to compare here a little bit, mostly in terms of chirognomy, but I can see a real great amount in his left hand in terms of the chirology, that is the study of the lines in the hands. So to sort of sum up really what's the overall hand shape it shows us, and this is an aspect known as chirognomy in palmistry. Attenborough has a combination of a sensual and a practical hand type, mostly sensual. And actually, there are quite a few similarities with um, Nawaz Sharif, who I looked at last week, which was a bit of a surprise, really. Now, this image is quite good for just getting a good idea as to the hand shape, the hand type. And what I mean by a sensual and a practical hand, I'm not going to reiterate too much because I have explained this in great detail on my website. If you want to check out my blog, have a look at my 12 hand types in palmistry. And I'll put a link in the description and you can read in detail there. But essentially, anyone with a sensual hand, their charisma, their character in some way often enhances their career. Their personality is strong. And being practical as well, having a practical element means he's sort of firm but fair as well. So sensual hands enjoy all the things in life that really need to be enjoyed, that should be enjoyed, but with a very sort of pragmatic approach as well, a very practical approach as well. Means that he is looking to enjoy these things sensibly and making sure that everyone else does as well. Certainly the upper portion of the palm is wider than the bottom, which actually I thought was quite interesting. There is certainly a greater capacity of thinking and feeling about this person than activity and action. I was expecting to see someone who was a bit more active physically. I was expecting to see someone who was an explorer and a pioneer. But we're not quite seeing that. Actually, this is someone who's very academic and mentally gifted, as well as having a real strength of heart as well. And what he does with feeling. Now, the Jupiter fingers are really interesting because they are wide at the basal phalanx, as all sensual hands have widened basal phalanges, which show a need to satisfy the physical. As I say, he enjoys the pleasures in life. What's really interesting about the Jupiter fingers, the index fingers here, are that they are conic, somewhat pointed, especially on the right hand. And what this shows us is that he has a developed um, sense of explaining and instructing. He has this developed um, ability to teach and pass on information. The Jupiter finger, the tip of the Jupiter finger shows us how our perception and our intuitive ability to understand our place in the world. And he has kind of sharpened this perception over time as well. That's what that shows us. That I find really interesting. The finger itself as well is a good length. He has a good sense of a good strength of ego, a good sense of confidence, but not so much that he has an overinflated opinion of himself. He knows his place in the world and where he fits into it. The Apollo finger is wide at the base, particularly more so than any other finger. And the tip is also well developed. Mercury tends to kind of lean towards this tip as well. the tip of Apollo is our appreciation for natural beauty. And there is something of very strong mark, vertical expression here seen on this tip, which shows a very distinctive and unique perception of natural beauty, of how things should look and how things should be. Now, combine this with a well-developed basal phalanx of Apollo, we have someone who has very strong feelings about how people should act in in their environment, how they should look, how they should behave, um, how they should carry themselves and conduct themselves. So really, this is a marking of someone who feels very strongly about the environment, and that's clear. Now, the Mercury finger is the finger of communication and expression. It is long, particularly when we offset the overall length of this finger against the Apollo finger. It is very long. And this really increases the capacity to express and communicate, as well as absorb information. And what I notice, particularly here, more so than the other fingers, is that the tip of Mercury is pointed. Now, this increases the ability to verbalize. Vocal expression is is remarkably strong. His ability to formulate words, his ability to articulate is strong. He has a sharp wit and a sharp tongue. But also, I'm immediately drawn to the headline after looking at the Mercury finger because there is a writer's fork. So not only is he very strong verbally, and that makes sense, he's a TV presenter, but he also has literary gifts as well. He's a highly gifted individual altogether, but the width of the Mercury finger is quite strong as well. So we have quite a strong voice, a strong message, and quite a strong personality overall, because being a sensual hand, the character, the personality is always quite sort of vibrant. There's a strong charisma. And being that there's a relatively short thumb, which was a bit of a surprise to me actually, it means that they are efficient in what they do. They're quite quick about the way in which they go about their work. So when you combine that with their character coming across into their work, there is a sense of enthusiasm here, a sense of charm, essentially. And this is all sort of combined in with how they operate and carry themselves. I find the headline fascinating on his hand for a number of reasons. One, I mean, firstly, look at how high up on the hand it begins in the first place. This shows us someone who is very ambitious. And there's also an effort line here that rises as well, very strong ambition, or effort line rather, that rises from this headline into an unmistakable teacher square here. And as I've said, he has this strong ability to break down information, to explain, to pass on information, as well as remarkably strong vocal skills here. So he is a leader by example as well as in his academic and verbal approach as well. But as well as this, the lifeline begins um, on Jupiter itself. And this is, without a doubt, a leader by example. This is someone who people wish to follow in their footsteps. He is very capable at leading just very naturally in himself, who he is as a person, is someone that people look up to. He's a natural leader by example, and the best teachers always are. He's a natural teacher as well. Georges Moucheli would have said he was a Jupiterian. Now, I've mentioned very positive things so far about Attenborough, but let's just point out one or two negatives here because whilst he does have this writer's fork, there is something of an indecisive nature about him. And this is also enhanced somewhat by the crossing of the life and the headline. There are at times um, something of um, he sits on the fence at times. He's uncertain. He's so able to see things from more than one perspective that he cannot pick a lane at times. Also, and this is interesting, I find this really interesting. Look at the cross here, seen on the inner Mars Mount. Now, this shows a very argumentative nature. Now, as I've already mentioned, he has a powerful message to get across. Not only the length, but the width of Mercury is strong. His voice is strong. All the things are a good width. Personality is strong. Skill set is strong as well. But he's not one to back down, and he's likely one to cause arguments as well. And that, combined with sometimes actually not knowing where he even stands in his own argument, is probably quite frustrating for those who are close to him, those in a relationship with him. Also, I touched on it earlier, the Mercury finger leans slightly towards appreciation, art, and natural beauty. But there is at times something of potentially preoccupation with the opposite sex, as well as even just the environment. Perhaps he was someone who just sort of stared out of the window when he was at school and didn't pay attention to his teachers. The headline does dip into lunar, well-developed amount of lunar after all. It's not all that straight. So he is someone who is a bit of a dreamer, and he's certainly idealistic as well. But not to the point of unrealistic. We have the heartline dipping into Jupiter, but not taking away from the touch of the practical that this hand has, as well as that the headline is not drooping too heavily into Luna. Where it does here, it's leavened by the upper branch. Overall, it reaches into healthy place of imagination. He's balanced here in terms of expectation, reality and the abstract. Now, I'm really going to start dipping into the chirology here because this is something I found just absolutely fascinating. First, I thought he has a double lifeline, but then I realized actually this is a Mars line and a very strong one, and it runs for the majority of his life. This Mars line begins around about the age of mid to late 20s, and it really starts to grow and it runs on the inside of quite a narrow amount of Venus. On his left hand, it shows us his feelings about his work. He's fighting for a cause. His work is his cause. And, he's not just a career conservationist. He genuinely feels very strongly about the environment and about the future, about the planet. This isn't just someone who is putting on a show, a song and a dance. And the other thing I noticed really interesting is that there is something of an obstacle that cuts through this Mars line, the lifeline, and the fate line. And that occurs late 20s. There was something of a real obstacle here that threatened the overall path, his overall destiny here, and he overcame this. I don't know what this was, but I would say late 20s, which is really interesting because he made his debut when he was 25, 26, and it was never really meant to happen. It was just a sort of a fluke. I think someone was off sick that day. He went on camera and it went down really well. And that kind of kicked off his career. Now, what's really interesting is that this Mars line, the development of this Mars line, mid to late 20s, is you can see here his fate line, mid to late 20s, merges and becomes one. Now, when that happens, you have a real strength of purpose. You have a real, um, think of the fate line as a tree, a plant, and every other mount and major line in the hand is almost like soil and valleys and rivers looking, searching to nourish the roots of this tree and create the very best possible circumstance for this tree of purpose, if you like, this fate plant. And what happens when we have these two roots of potential purpose join in and create this trunk, this stem? We have here a strengthening of purpose. And so it's a sign of uh, achievement. It's a sign of things coming together, creating a fundamental achievement, a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in efforts. And so this happens at around about the same age, mid to late 20s on the fate line. Because where the fate line meets, the headline is at the age of 35. This here is about the age of 26. So I find that really interesting. But just to backtrack a little bit here, notice how the fate line is, again, we see roots here forming. We see thoughts and feelings, and um, we're reaching from a place of ancestral memory, almost a past life here. Now, it's as if the person's destiny, their fate, comes from such lower depths of Luna and Pluto that their destiny was almost out of their control. This was always going to happen for this person. A career in the limelight, a career with an audience. And that said, notice how Pluto, the amount of Pluto here, is so raised that it almost levels off Venus and Pluto altogether. The whole base here of the palm, it's not wide, but it's leveled off. Neptune is the ability to captivate and hypnotize an audience, and as I've said, his um, a combination of his ability to articulate, his verbal skills, as well as his expressive skills overall, and ability to captivate and combine that with his academic abilities. Everything here points towards a real strength of his purpose, and that's what all these kind of roots here are, gearing this strength of his fate line for and towards as well. And there was certainly a time of travel that really um, impacted uh, and created a necessary element for success as well in his career. And people with a career in the limelight, I mean, look at the strength of this here. It was meant to be. And again, I feel like there's something of he likely had a career in the limelight in a past life as well. He's sort of drawing on um, ancestral memories here with his ability to um, be heard and have his message heard. People who have a career in the limelight depend on their audience. They depend on what other people think about them, which is likely why his Apollo finger is ever so slightly longer than the Jupiter finger. If you notice here on this right hand, it's not the best of images because he's sort of cupping his hand ever so slightly. But you can see how Apollo is slightly longer than Jupiter, and that's because both the fingers are level in terms of where they're set on the palm. So mid to late 20s, big time, big year, particularly 26 here, but also around about the age of 30. And that might actually be where, this obstacle comes. There was something that occurs here at the age of 30, and I don't know what it was in his career. Um, but it presented such an obstacle that it looked to threaten his overall success in life. Now, at the age of 37, you see here the headline drifts upwards and the career shifts overall. There's an overlap here, so he's never out of work, but there's a dramatic shift in his job role, in his career. And I've just noticed actually on the heartline, there's a branch that reaches right down, and I think that around about the age of 35, there was some heartache here, um, potentially a breakup, maybe a breakdown in marriage. But 37 here, the headline splits apart and rises up towards, um, and initially I was thinking outer Mars, but actually it's more like Mercury. So there's a real um, sense of freedom and expressive development. So I'm imagining that he traveled in his career at this time and this really opened up some opportunities. And maybe actually after this potential breakdown of relationship a few years earlier, there were more opportunities for, um, freedom in terms of, he's not as confined perhaps, or at least this is a feeling because we're looking at the left hand here. So I'm trying to just bear that in mind that pretty much everything I'm saying is really internal thoughts and feelings. Because when I talk about career and money and achievement and advancement in life, the right hand will show the monetary, the environmental impacts. And so you can see the same events, but on the right hand, certain things will look stronger and weaker. So you can see how a person is affected more emotionally, internally on the left hand, whereas on the right hand, you'll see all the kind of financial things, um, as well as, physical as well, much more physical, environmentally as well as the body. And actually, on that note, for a 98-year-old, I know it's only the left hand, but look, there's no health line. None. I've never seen that before. That's remarkable. I think he has exceptional genes. So at 37, his career really takes off, but at 40, 42-ish, even more so. There's a dramatic look at the strength of the fate line here. It's so deep. There's a great sense of satisfaction from his work. And the other thing I noticed was, now remember earlier on I said the fate line at the age of mid to late 20s merges as one. Well, it happens again. It happens here, I would say mid to late 60s. And when it happens here, again, this is the left hand, so we're thinking this is satisfaction. This is a real sense of fulfillment about his path in life. And at 69, he was knighted for his services towards his country. Now, I'm just going to finish this video off with a couple of, I think, really interesting little mentions. There is, I feel, a clearly defined vertical line on the basal phalanx of the Jupiter finger. And this really provides a bit of rationality around satisfying the physical needs. As I say, the basal phalanges of the fingers represent the body and physical control, particularly with Jupiter. This is all about physical control. And there is a desire here to enjoy food, sex, wine, in fact. But this vertical line here leavens this desire and actually promotes a sense of acting accordingly and an ability to, in fact, show and say how to act accordingly. And I just think that's so apt because that's exactly what David Attenborough does. He shows us how we, he shows us all the wonderful, beautiful things in the world. And by doing that, he is, it's not even needing, he doesn't even need to tell us because he's sort of leading by that example of just showing instead of telling, he's showing. And so he's really making such a profound impression on the rest of us by this ability to um, essentially rein in greed. That's what we're seeing here. So when you combine this with this tremendous ability to teach here, um, as well as explain and present, we have just all the hallmarks of someone who is just a tremendous leader, teacher, um, and presenter. I think this is why he makes not just a tremendous sort of presenter because of this personality that he is, because we get the great sense of that he truly, feels and believes every word he's saying, Mhm. actually understands the human condition in so much as why people do what they do and why they enjoy what they enjoy. He is somewhat um, inherently a bit of a hedonist himself, but he has a good sense of morality. This reins in this need to satiate physical desire. Essentially, he understands that greed is the root of many of the issues that he feels so strongly about. And that is pretty much what we're seeing here. I'll explain a little bit more about this sign and others in another video on all of the phalanges of the fingers. And the last thing I want to mention here is again on the phalanges. Because what we see here is a horizontal line on the middle phalanges of, in particular, these three fingers, Jupiter, Saturn, and Apollo. And the middle phalanges represent the mental. Like the palm, the bottom of the palm represents the physical, the body. The middle section of the palm represents the mental plane, and the upper, the emotional and spiritual. The fingers work in a likewise fashion. The physical, the mental, and the more sort of spiritual. And so when we're looking at something that affects all of the potentially mental, this is also uh, body, uh, head, and the kind of what affects us other than that, higher than that. So when we're looking at this, now I know it's a left hand, I know that this is more internal, but when it's across the board like this, it's sometimes something physical as well. And I actually believe we'll see this on his right hand as well, if we could see an image that was in fact clear enough, which unfortunately I just couldn't find one. But I have seen this before on someone's hands, and it was on both hands, and it was a sign that he had forceps used on him as a child during childbirth. I was talking to this chap, and I asked him if he had a head injury when he was young. It had seemed to affect, um, the sort of the mind, um, on the right hand at least. All of these middle phalanges could, in some way, represent something to do with the throat, nose, ears, eyes, mouth, or head. And because it was across the board, I thought, well, it's got to be something physical here. It's on the right hand, and it was on his left hand as well, as we see it here. And it was starting most strongly on Jupiter and becoming less, ingrained as it went across his fingers. And I asked if he had some sort of head injury when he was young, and he said no. And as I was asking, I noticed a scar on his temple, just here. And I pointed to it, and he said, he explained as I was just about to ask, and he said, they used forceps on me during childbirth. My head was so big, and he had a scar ever since. And so that's what these lines meant. And I believe the same for David Attenborough. I believe forceps were used on his cranium during childbirth. So there we go. That's my video. for David Attenborough. That's my video for this Sunday. If you have enjoyed this video, please do comment. Please like, share, subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts are. And also let me know who you would like me to read the palms of next Sunday. I'm really always very happy to receive thoughts and ideas as to who to read for next because I'm always thinking about it. But I really want to know what your thoughts are. And often people will say things and I think, oh, do you know what? It's a great idea, as I did with this palm reading. And by the way, this palm reading was suggested to me by a good friend of mine and pretty much a lifelong advocate of my interest and learning journey in palmistry. And he's been learning on and off like me for nearly as long. And so you know who you are. Thank you, and thanks for all your support. Thank you to everyone for all of your support as well. Um, Views have been going down recently, but subscribers have been going up, and I won't stop making these videos regardless of what happens. So yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.